One of your sons was born with congenital heart defect, with a congenital heart defect. How has that impacted you and your philosophy and the way you coach and love and the way that you think about the future?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it, a huge, huge, not only a moment, it's really been a 9-year journey. Really quickly, my son TJ, he's 9. He'll be 10 in this October. He was born with a very serious, complex congenital heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. In essence, in layman's terms, he didn't have a left ventricle. His entire left chamber of his heart was non-functional from the moment he was born. We knew he was going to be born with it. He was diagnosed in utero. So at 2 days old, he underwent what would become 3 reconstructive open heart surgeries to make, they call him a single ventricle. He's going to have one ventricle, one chamber of his heart that is going to do the entire cardiac process that you and I have multiple chambers to pump oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. His blood would all pool in one of those ventricles and they would create passive airflows with the lungs. And it was like a 3-stage process: 2 days old, 5 months old, 2 years old. So he got reconstructed to a single ventricle. He lived like that for 6 years. So he was 6 years post his final surgery as a single ventricle, what they call single ventricle baby. Last summer or last spring, we're coming up on about a year. Last May, we brought him in and he was determined that he was in heart failure. His single ventricle Fontan was no longer working appropriately. He was not, the heart function, the muscle tissue was deteriorating, and he was in pretty much full scale heart failure. We were put on the heart transplant list, and June of last year, TJ, my son at 8 years old, underwent a heart transplant. And the thing that I always, as I reflect back, and you ask like what kind of a game changer that is, the words that start coming back is like perspective, right? Love, perseverance, adversity. I touched on earlier, like those lessons I learned as a tough kid that like, yeah, there's going to be bad days and no one's coming to rescue you. No one feels bad for you. Like, yeah, we love you as a family and we're here to help you, but like the outside world's moving on. Everyone, they're going to give you your condolences. They feel bad in the moment. They're moving on. And if you don't move on with them, you're going to get stuck in this bad moment. Like we learned those early on. And I think it really prepared us, my wife and I, to go through this with TJ for, in essence, 9 years where, yeah, we had our bad days. We had our moments where I needed to be the rock. And then I had days where I needed her to be the rock. And we kind of would take turns picking each other up. And we learned a lot about each other. You learn a lot about relationships and family and love when things are bad, right? Everyone's great when things are good. That's easy to live. But like, how is your marriage when things are bad? How is marriage when you're both on 2 hours of sleep in the ICU and you're a little irritated? Like, can you take a deep breath and be patient with one another? Or are you going to jump down each other's throat because you're on edge? Like, all of those lessons were really, really valuable for us. And I'll tell you, these last 9 years have really changed our perspective and outlook on what's really important and what are things that we think are important.